Ah, the Rings of Power. Amazon's billion-dollar investment for curing insomnia. Season 1, Episode 4, The Great Wave of Boredom. This is the worst episode of the season so far. To be honest, I was so annoyed with the entire episode, I didn't even feel like doing a review. It is dull, boring, and absolutely pointless. The story progresses nowhere, with piss poor writing that will give any person with half a brain an aneurysm. I have never seen any show that has infuriated me so much. It took me almost the whole day to get through the entire episode. The show doesn't show anything, just characters keep telling this is happening and that is happening. The entire timeline is scrambled. And forget lore. This doesn't even have a smidge of anything related to Tolkien. The main characters are unlikable, horrible pieces of shit. There is no one in this show with whom you can relate and actually root for. There is no canon whatsoever. The showrunners are a bunch of hacks who has no idea of what they are even doing. Even if this was a standalone fantasy show, it would not stand up to any schlock B movies. So the episode starts with Muriel blessing the newborns when they hear a rumble. She writes it off as the island needing to stretch. As the rumble happens again, she sees a great wave crashing down over Numenor. As she gets the full weight of the wave crashing down upon her, she wakes up, only to find out that it's a perfect day for racism, as Arian sees the man from the Blacksmiths Guild that has his face pasted on the wall by Hallbrand giving a speech in the streets.
All right, folks, my name is Daryl Weathers, and I'm with the Construction Workers Union. And now these people from the future are showing up and offering to do the same work for next to nothing. They took our jobs!
Talking about how elves are all taking their jobs. Elves who don't tire, don't sleep, don't age. And how the Queen Regent has been taking orders from the insufferable bitch. She must be an elf lover like her father. I guess the writers doubled down on the allegory part.
They took our jobs! They took your jobs! They took your jobs too!
I have no idea where they are seeing all the elves on their shores taking all their jobs and trades. It's just strong women running around, and I believe she doesn't even want to be on the island, let alone work. This is what happens when you try to shove in your agendas in the name of modernization. Only a bunch of dim-witted hacks can write something this idiotic. This is why the Númenóreans hate elves? In short, the real reason why the king's faction disliked the elves is for their immortality. They were jealous of the elves. That is the reason they turned away from the Eldar and the Valar. And that's when Sauron manipulated the then king Ar-Pharazôn into attacking Aman, saying the Valar are denying them immortality, which wrought the anger of the Valar and the downfall of Númenor. This makes more sense than
They took our jobs!
They took your jobs! They took your jobs! Took your jobs!
So anyways, Pharazôn walks in and gives some bullshit speech about keeping the elves out of Númenor and swears on the calluses of his hands. Right, royalty swearing on the imaginary calluses of his hands. Good one. So anyways, that little speech and drinks out of the blue sways the people over, even the instigator. If Númenóreans' minds are this fickle, Sauron will have a field day with them. And all this time, Iarian just watches them from the side. That's what she does the entire episode. She just watches people from the sidelines. That's why the showrunners needed another original female character in this show, and to give this kind of dialogues.
Supposed to make you forget your troubles, or so they say.
My troubles have been too hard won.
Yeah, I'll just be a miserable little cow from the sidelines. Thank you. Meanwhile, we are back in the throne room with Miriel, Galadriel and Elendil. Galadriel presents her findings about Sauron and his plan, and about Viscount Aragorn, how he's an exiled heir to the throne of the Southlands. To which Miriel remarks, then that makes Elendil here a runic emperor. The dialogues here are just relentless. So Galadriel gives the same dialogue as Elrond from the Fellowship about Halbrand's people are scattered and leaderless, but with the backing of Miriel and her people, they can unite under his banner and fight against Sauron and his army.
A scattered, divided, leaderless.
There is one who could unite them. One who
reclaim the throne of Gondor.
Quite politely, Miriel refuses, saying Numenor has chosen another path, and be it king or carpenter, Halbrand will face justice. So Galadriel decides to turn into the miserable little bitch that she is and question Miriel's right to be a ruler, and demands to speak with her manager, the real king, Tar Palantir, so she can ask the person with real power and authority. When Miriel checks her for her impertinence, she replies,
There's a tempest in me. It swept me to this island for a reason, and it will not be quelled by you, Regent.
Off with his head!
So she gets her dumbass thrown in the dungeon for sedation. Now this scene is similar to the scene from Return of the King, where Gandalf confronts Denethor.
Authority is not given to you to deny the return of the king, steward.
This scene works because Denethor here is steward and he did not want to give up power. However, it doesn't work in case of Galadriel, because Miriel is the king's daughter. But according to the lore, if our Pharazôn was king and Galadriel gave this dialogue, this would have worked. We are halfway into the series and it already feels like a rehash of the Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, but not in a good way. They have picked up the scenes and in their own retarded way made them worse. So to get on to more pointless scene, we get to Isildur on the ship, where he starts to daydream again about the island calling him. So instead of resigning like a normal person, he tries to get him thrown off the navy by deciding to let go of the rope he was holding by putting people's lives in danger. Idiotically, the captain throws his two friends out as well. Why? Don't know. Don't ask questions. Or maybe the lazy writers needed to create drama and conflict in between the three friends, and this was the best idea they could come up with. Then we are back at the orc camp and finally get a face reveal of Adar, who turns out to be Uncle Benjen from Game of Thrones. Seems the orc revere him as father and he cares for the orcs too. We get a weird scene where Adar shows sympathy towards dying orc, as he puts him out of his misery by stabbing him, and almost tearing up in the process. Guess we need to make evil more relatable now as well. We got to humanize the orcs too. Orcs, who cares about no one, let alone themselves. Orcs showing more compassion to one another than the savage Harfoots. Guess meat's not back in the menu, boys. So Adar asks Arondir where he's from. Arondir says Beleriand. This makes no sense, as in the beginning of the show when Galadriel was narrating, she never mentions anything about Beleriand or elves existing in Middle-earth. Where is this magical land you are talking about? This is what happens when writers are not clear about their world building and keeps changing and adding stuff as per their need. This makes a lot of plot contrivances. Anyways, Adar mentions he has visited there once when he was young. He also tells that Arondir has been lied to, and the root lies throughout the land, and all can be untangled once the land has been recreated, which only a god can do. This can be a hint at Sauron, or maybe he thinks Sauron is a god, and he releases Arondir to deliver a message to the people who have taken refuge in the watchtower of Ostirith. Yes, release the only surviving elf because the show needs him to be alive for more episodes. He is the only black elf in the show and he can't die. Talking about Ostirith, we then cut to the watchtower with people flooding in all over from the Southlands, even from Orodruin, which is Mount Doom. I'm guessing Shelob or any spiders doesn't exist in this world since there has been no mention of Ungoliant. And seeing so many people from Orodruin, which was basically her feeding ground. And seeing the size of the watchtower, I am quite amazed how all the people just magically fit in there. Turns out due to so many people there is food shortage, and Bronwyn, who is acting like the big cheese cause reasons, decides to cut down on everyone's rations, to which the tavern owner says he's not having it, and they have a bit of disagreement, when Theo suggests getting food back from the abandoned villages, as rabbit meat, even if they could find any, will only last about a day. But Bronwyn forbids him from going, but he goes anyways, cause they are such a rebel at this age. So he takes his only friend with him, and also the broken sword hilt. They grab a bunch of food and Theo wants to check the tavern too, but his friend isn't going in and decides to run away after Theo goes in and the sun gets hidden behind the clouds. At least he took the food cart with him. Inside, as Theo tries to gather a bag of grains, he gets attacked by an orc and gets his leg nicked. He decides to take out the broken sword hilt and stab his hand with the hilt, which makes the sword form, and he cuts the orc and runs outside. There goes my theory of Morgul blade, cause Morgul blades are nothing like that. We have no idea what that blade is actually, or maybe the writer doesn't even know what they need it to be, as of yet. It's just another mystery box MacGuffin. The orc tells the raiding party that the boy has the hilt and to fan out and search for him, while he takes a drink from the well. Theo, who was hiding in the well, yelps like a little girl when the orc drops the bucket on his head. The orc hears that and comes back and peeks inside the well, but decides to wait only 2 seconds. Anyone with half a brain will obviously understand that someone is hiding under the water and wait them out, but since this show is run by morons, the orc leaves. Back in Eregion, we get a glimpse of the tower which the dwarves are building for Celebrimbor, and by the looks of it, feels like months' work, whereas only few days has passed on some scenes of the show, like in Numenor. Seriously, it is absolutely baffling how time works in this show. Elrond also mentions something about elves and dwarves working together, but we never get to see anyone working on the tower. As far as I can see, it seems like it has been abandoned halfway. Anyways, Celebrimbor, who is wearing the same maternity dress, reminisces about Eärendil, Elrond's father. He also mentions that Durin seems to be hiding something from him. So Elrond decides to visit him, and snap, we are in Khazad-dûm in Durin's chambers. Durin is not at home, and Disa tries to make excuses and finally fixes on him gone to mine quartz in some far-off chasm, while the children play the knocking game and sings a song. Remember this, cause it will be important later. So Elrond notices that Disa is lying and Durin's mining gear is in his room, and also Disa is making his favorite food when he's supposedly far off. To which Disa remarks,
"Calling a dwarf dishonest in her own home. It's a recipe for strong gravy."
what is this line of dialogue and what is the context to that? Anyways, Disa gets a bit worked up and lies some more, which Elrond absolutely sees through but decides not to challenge her. Instead, he tails her when she goes to meet Durin and watches their conversation from afar and understand everything. Where was this keen eyesight of the elves when the massive deforestation was happening in the Southlands? Stop it, don't ask questions. So Elrond goes to the mine Durin was talking about, but reaches a dead end. He notices footprints leading away from the wall, so he decides to knock on the wall and say the exact words of the song the kids were singing, which actually opens the door. Guys, I give you rings of power. I'm not even gonna comment on how convenient and absolutely moronic the entire scene is. So Elrond goes in and finds a vein of mithril on the wall, who still doesn't know what exactly it is, as Durin walks in accusing him that this was the real reason he was sent by Gil-galad to spy on him and take away their find, which doesn't make a lick of sense since no one has mentioned anything about their find in the previous episodes and what exactly it is. Durin asks Elrond to make an oath about not saying anything about this to anyone before he tells him what actually it is. So Elrond swears on the memory of his father Eärendil, and Durin tells him that it is a new ore, lighter than silk and harder than iron, something more dearer than gold, called grey glitter, or in the elven tongue Mithraud, which Elrond corrects him to be mithril. He also asks why all the secrecy if it's so valuable and not celebrate it. Durin mentioned because it is perilous to mine and his father has restricted it for safety, and lets Elrond keeps the ore sample as a token to their friendship, which I feel will create a lot of unnecessary complications further down the road. Anyways, while this conversation is going, the mine starts to rumble and collapses, trapping the dwarves inside, and to me it sounded more like a roar hidden within the rumble, which could be very well the Balrog deep beneath the mine waking up. Back in Numenor, we get another pointless scene between Eärien and Kemen, and then we move on to Galadriel in prison, where finally we get a decent scene as Knock of Aragorn puts Galadriel in her place. He remarks, as much as he admires her charging into every obstacle like a colt in full gallop, if it has ever occurred to her that she is not battling trolls or orcs, but men. As expected, Galadriel gets pissy and says whether he is going to lecture her on the art of war. So Halbrand reminds her that the Queen's Court is not her usual battlefield, and she has shown all the traits of which the Númenóreans fear. During all this time, she has demanded a ship, insulted the Queen and her people, defied her orders, and now she is in jail. Why? It wasn't because she asked her to fight for the Southlands, but when she demanded to see the king, who hides in a tower and no one has seen for years. So, an Eldar, who is thousands of years old, gets schooled by a man who is not even 50 on thought process. This is exactly how the real Galadriel should be. The Queen's Court is her battlefield, she being royalty and all. She was known for her knowledge and her wisdom and never took active part in any battles. She did not rush into every battle swords in hand, raving like a lunatic. Who even thought that this will work in the show? Warrior Galadriel scourge at the orcs, my ass. Anyways, Pharazôn walks in and says the Queen has decided to ship up Galadriel to Middle-earth under armed escort tonight. So instead of just leaving, which she always wanted, she manhandles all the guards in the most awkward and horrible choreographed scene I have ever seen and locks them up in her cell with a smart. And Pharazôn just watches her with his sword half drawn and does nothing. Then we get hit by another pointless scene between Isildur and Eärien, which moves the plot nowhere. Meanwhile, we see Galadriel climbing a tower like Altair and breaks down a window to get into the king's bedchamber, to find Miriel already waiting for her beside the bedridden king Tar Palantir. Firstly, how did she even know that this was where the king was? And what happened to all the tower guards? Stop asking questions. If this show made any sense, it would have been halfway decent. Galadriel is shocked to see her there, and Miriel tells her that a garrison of troops waits outside to escort her to her ship, and she would be wise to take it. Yeah, Galadriel and wise doesn't go hand in hand. So Galadriel apologizes for her behavior, and Miriel tells her to keep the secret of her father's condition to herself. Galadriel asks her father is one of the faithful, why isn't she one too? Miriel tells her that usually her father was quite restrained in his beliefs, but after his coronation he became strident and proclaimed that they have provoked the anger of the Valar and that everyone needs to repent and go back to the old ways, which cost him his throne, and Miriel was made queen regent in his stead. We get a few shots of weapons which the fans will notice. First of all, there is Narsil, then there is Dramborleg and the Swan Shield. Anyways, Miriel then shows Galadriel a Palantir which her father showed it to her after she became queen. She also mentions that of the 7 stones, 6 of them are either lost or hidden. That's again is another deviation from the lore, because Elendil saved and brought all the 7 seeing stones to Middle-earth after destruction of Númenor. It was only after that, during the Third Age, when they were lost. Getting back on track, Miriel tells Galadriel to be careful with the Palantir as it is different from the other ones, to which Galadriel replies she has touched Palantiri before, to which Miriel remarks, "You have not touched this one before." Now where did I hear this set of dialogue before? Oh right.
But you have not seen what I've seen.
I have seen my share.
You have not seen what I have seen.
Anyways, when she touches, she sees the same vision of Númenor's destruction which Miriel saw at the beginning of the episode. Miriel says it is Númenor's future and it began when Galadriel arrived on the island. But she doesn't blame her because only Númenor itself can bring about her own downfall. Her father believed it, which almost destroyed Numenor. So even if she wants to help, the rest of Numenor doesn't. Hence, tomorrow she will announce that Galadriel is gone and the crisis can be averted. Back at the watchtower, the hunters turn in almost next to nothing because all the animals have fled the lands. Meanwhile, Rowan returns with the cart and lies about ditching Theo. Back at the village, Theo is still hiding in the well. And all this time the orcs has searched everywhere through the entire village but haven't come to check the well or get a drink of water or never got a whiff of his smell.
What is it? What do you smell? Man flesh.
So Theo decides to climb out of the well and get out of the village. We get a really dodgy Horizon and Assassin's Creed-esque sequence where he tries to dodge and hide from the orcs in the tall grass and everything, but finally gets caught by the same orc from the morning. The orc tries to cut off his arm only to get a sword in the back. Turns out it was Arondir, and apparently he has been given his weapons back when he was released. However, I guess Adar forgot to mention to the rest of the orcs that he has been released to act as a messenger, and the orc tries to hunt him down. So Arondir and Theo runs through the forest the entire night to get to the watchtower, which apparently was minutes away when Theo came earlier that morning. Anyways, they also ran into Bronwyn in the forest, who exactly ran the same way the entire night, and only to randomly find Theo halfway through the forest. I guess distance works differently during the night. Just as they get out of the forest, the sun rises and the orcs who were chasing them stops at the edge of the forest, and for some reason also decides to stop shooting arrows at them and just stares and snarls at them. We then cut to Disa singing to the rocks to let the dwarves come out alive from the mines. Apparently this works, as we see some gravel rustling over the rocks, and lo and behold the dwarves come out alive as well, which we never get to see, just hear from Durin, who walks in covered in dirt. Disa apologizes for lying and Elrond lets it slide. Durin whines about his father shutting down the mine. Next we get a scene which actually makes sense in the entire episode, as Elrond shares his feelings about wanting to see his father just one last time. Arundel's deeds were so great that he was turned into a star by the Valar to forever carry the even star, and Elrond, unlike Durin, can't even talk to his father to hear his approval or disappointment, and tells Durin not to squander the moment which he has left with his. However, the next scene doesn't work, where Durin goes to meet his father, because we never get to see the conflict between them, only get a segment in the earlier episodes where they speculate about Elrond's plan. Where is all this anger towards his father coming from? Back at the watchtower, Arondir gives Bronwyn Adar's message, which is to forsake all their land and swear fealty to him, or die. I guess Arondir has thicker plot armor than anyone here, for easily a group of orcs could have delivered the same message. Meanwhile, Theo, who is inconspicuously constantly looking for the sword hilt, gets caught out by the tavern owner. Turns out it was his barn that Theo took the sword from, and he has also used it on himself. The falling meteor was a sign for Sauron's return, as he is loyal to him and thinks Theo is too. Next scene, we see Adar watching Ed from Lion King gnaw on a severed hand, while an orc reports that they have found the broken sword hilt, which is at the tower. We end the episode in Numenor, where we see Galadriel finally leaving the island with an armed escort. As Miriel goes to court, the petals of Nimloth starts to fall, and we get graced by the same dialogue from the earlier episode about the tree of Nimloth and why the petals fall. She addresses the court about her decision to personally escort Galadriel and Halbrand to Middle-earth, and to aid the people who are now besieged in the Southlands. So Elendil asks for volunteers from the masses, to which Isildur and his former friends sign up, along with a bunch of other people. I'm not sure why she wouldn't take the army rather than asking for volunteers, or is it that Numenor has no army? This entire scene kinda reminds me of the scene from 300.
You, there. What is your profession?
I'm a potter.
And you, Arcadian. What is your profession?
Sculptor, sir.
You?
Blacksmith.
Spartans! What is your profession?
So that's it, that's the end of episode 4. The entire episode was how the elves are taking their jobs and they can't help her or it will bring destruction to Numenor. But suddenly everyone agrees when the petal starts to fall and even decides to join the army. What the hell is happening? There is no cohesiveness. The writers are like hyperactive kid on coke who can't even decide on one thing more than few seconds. The show has already deviated so much from the lore that it's just better to forget it and just watch it like a generic fantasy show. But even if we forgive on the lore, that still doesn't solve the issue of bad writing and plot contrivances. We are halfway through the series and the entire 4 episodes could have fit into one episode. The plot moves nowhere. The show is boring and feels mostly a rehash of the Peter Jackson's trilogy, with a few lore dropped here and there in the form of Easter eggs. The showrunners clearly has no idea what exactly they are doing. They have no idea how to write a character or how to progress a story. I know I have said it enough times, but this was the worst episode of the series so far. More and more people are losing interest in it every week. Even the shills and the normies are saying it is boring. The pacing is just awful. I would rather watch She-Hulk than suffer through this harrowing.